Good morning, DevOps. I feel like I need to do some call and response after that drumming. You know, when I say Java, you say awesome, that kind of thing. But I think it's a bit too early. I think we've definitely been woken up, haven't we? So while Trisha gets mic'd up here, it's an interesting challenge. We were pitched about sort of looking at the skills of a programmer, then looking at how a team impacts a developer or an individual, and now looking at how an individual impacts a team. It's quite a challenge for us. It's been an international sort of effort developing this presentation. Trish and I met, I think, in Hungary at CraftConf, chatted around some ideas. We met last weekend in QCon New York, chatted around some more ideas, and then we've been sort of bouncing stuff around email and met in London a few times. So lots of effort's gone into it. We've sort of reached out to our friends, got some input as well in terms of what they think the actual impact an individual can have on the team is. And we're hopefully going to share some of our stories over our careers, longer than we probably like to admit, Trish, haven't we? We've been working in the industry. But we're going to share some of our stories over the past sort of few years, and then at the end, draw together some common themes we hope that everyone in the audience will relate to in terms of us as individuals, developers, architects, QA, whatever job you may do, relate to how you can take stuff away today and after all these awesome sessions over the next 2 days, actually make a difference in your team, be that at work, be that in your user group, or be that just in the world, yeah? Sounds kind of lofty goal, doesn't it? But we'll give it a go.
Yeah, I like the way you managed to ad-lib that whole thing while I was getting mic'd up and put the thing in. Well done. I don't know where we were now. What are we going to do? Yes, so this is Daniel. I'm Trisha. And our whole intro is completely... Yes. Anyway, so we're talking about teams. That's kind of the theme of this whole conference, but it's also obviously the theme of this keynote. And often, when we think about teams, we sort of think about this homogenous blob of like individuals, or maybe we might not, but we suspect that perhaps our business thinks of us as being interchangeable typists at the keyboard. So we think of a team as being like this cloudy, nebulous thing, which kind of works together to eventually produce code. But weirdly, when we actually start trying to recruit for teams or when we talk about individuals, we often talk about rock stars. I quite like the fact that we had the drummers on stage earlier because they kind of countered that and sort of showed that you have to work together as a team. But yeah, we talk about rock stars and we talk about ninjas and we try and hire these awesome developers because we think a 10x developer is going to be the way to achieve productivity. But I think we've all been in teams where that rock star or ninja might in fact just be an individual who's a bit destructive, who perhaps isn't as good as he thinks he is. The thing about teams is that ultimately, of course, they are made up of individuals, of real people.
Yes. So I'm going to say that the joke really is, we often say there is no I in team, but there is a me if we look harder. Yeah. One of the classic jokes. And one I got, and we can go to the next, thanks Trish, go to the next slide. Well, another joke I've heard is, I got this from actually a colleague in finance, says, there is actually an I in team, it's in the a-hole. Work with me a little bit. Yeah, apologies. But as in, anyone who's worked in finance can relate to that, I think. The interesting thing is, though, is as developers and architects, I think we can relate to this, as in it's different levels of abstraction, as Trish hinted at there. As an organization, we've got some behavior and some output. So it's kind of fractal. We go down to the next level, departments, or teams, that kind of thing. Behavior, output, and then below that, there's clearly individuals. And it's sometimes hard, particularly when I've worked in big organizations, to realize the impact you can make as an individual. But you really can, as in, when you pause for a second and think it's only logical, as in the behavior, the emergent behavior of any team is a result of the individuals. Makes sense, yeah? But it takes a while to kind of get that sometimes. But what Trish and I are going to do over the next, let's say, I've jumped a slide, sorry. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to share stories. These are actually two teams I currently work on, DevOps Program Committee, Open Credo here. Apologies, I think my colleague Will's in the audience. Will, your photo still isn't on the website, so I can't credit you actually here. But these are two teams I'm part of, and they're both very good teams, but they have very different sort of makeup. They're very interesting individuals, very opinionated, very challenging individuals, but also very supporting. Yeah, and we listen and we respect each other, and that's kind of what we're going to dive into a bit, Trish, aren't we? I think some of the key things that we've seen over the last, 15 years for me, I'll admit, probably.
Yeah, about the same, yeah.
Working in the industry. I've seen some good stuff and some bad stuff, so we're going to share some patterns, sort of good patterns, and also some anti-patterns as well. So the first story is called The Quiet Mentors. And I'm going to tell this one. And I'm going to name check two people, Clayton Blake and Gary Watson. Gary's actually here. But on there, this is when Java EE fitted into one book back in the day, yeah, back in like 2002, I think it was. Now, Clayton's gone on to form Vivian. I think we've got some Vivian people in the audience, so shout out to the Vivian people. Yeah, I see, yeah, good stuff. Yeah, these people were amazing. It was, I was an intern. There was 3 of us actually went in to work for the government as interns, and there was a mix of people on the team. There was contractors, there was permanents, there was technical specialists. We were looking at sort of oil well drilling, that kind of thing. And there was a range of skill sets. There was juniors, like myself, you know, kind of thought I knew a lot of programming, but in reality probably didn't. There was mid-level people, there were senior-level people, and then there was the fabled kind of enterprise architect type people. And one thing that both Clayton and Gary taught me was sort of professionalism. They were the quiet mentors. They weren't in my face every day going, you know, you need to learn this, you need to do this. They just acted professionally all the time. They were constantly teaching us to learn new things. Java, like the Java 1.4 had just come out, which was like a revolution at the time in terms of non-blocking file I/O and other cool stuff. They were constantly learning. They were constantly sharing ideas. And one key thing is they were just nice to everyone. Yeah, which is, it seems like a small detail. Trish and I bounced around this, and being nice seems a bit fluffy sometimes. But it really made a difference. They were nice even to like people like just the cleaners, the coffee staff. Like in the government, that's quite rare, to be honest. Yeah, in the department I worked, everyone sort of just breezed past anyone that wasn't important. But in reality, everyone's important, yeah. And these guys made a really big point of sort of schooling us in just, you know, getting on with the job, doing a really good job. And I came to think this was normal. Yeah, being a professional, asking questions, checking the team understands what's going on, getting the pulse of your team. And, you know, for 18 months, I thought that was normal. Then I went back to uni, finished my degree, went into industry, did sort of 10 years of contract work, and that's anything but the norm, sadly, sometimes, I should say. And particularly as contractors, often as a contractor, I've worked as a contractor, you go in, you just do a job. You're so focused on what you're doing, you don't really look outwards to the team. But these guys really made the effort, and I really appreciate them. So I've definitely got to name check them, because they were really influential to the beginning of my career, and it really set the tone for what I did later on. Now, Trish and I are going to talk a few times about the Dreyfus model. Is everyone sort of familiar with the Dreyfus model of learning? Sort of. I see a few heads nods. Cool. So it is just a model. Like any model, it's not necessarily correct, but it can be useful at times. And it's how people learn a skill. So all of us have got multiple skills, and we're at various different stages on this model of where we're learning. It can be applied to anything, to reading, to driving, to programming, doing architecture, that kind of thing. We all start as a novice. Yeah. And if you're driving a car, as a novice, you need rules. You can see there, sort of rules. Rules, as in like put the clutch in, first gear, let the clutch out gently. You need that kind of thing, that kind of instruction as a novice. Now, as you move up through the ranks, things become more automatic. You're changing gear when situation arises. But you need different input as well. When you move up to the sort of competent level as a developer, you may no longer need just rules. If you need a conditional, use an if. You're able to solve your own problems. You've got enough sort of tacit knowledge to put things together, formulate new solutions, this kind of thing. And as you move up to being proficient and an expert, there's different things again. And as an expert, I'm sure many of you are experts in some things. Yeah, not necessarily programming or whatever, but try and explain what you're doing as an expert is really tricky to a novice sometimes, isn't it? You just do a lot of stuff intuitively, now. As a developer, I've been coding for so long now that I find it really hard when someone sort of, say, junior in my team, asks a really sensible question, but I have to pause for a second and go, I've kind of always done it that way. And then I think often sort of unpack the stuff around it, and it's actually quite interesting to do that kind of thing. So the key thing that Gary and Clayton were really good at in my team were recognizing where we were on this scale. Yeah. So as a Java developer, I was probably an advanced beginner, say. As an architect, clearly a novice. And they would speak to me when I asked questions, as an architect, that they'd give me rules. Oh, if you're doing this, apply this pattern. As a Java developer, they sort of say to me, well, have a look at Vector. Have a look at this non-blocking I/O class. And other people on the team, like experts, hearing them talk, like the two of them talk as experts together, they were using stuff at the time I didn't know what it was. There were design patterns. They're very good sort of ubiquitous language, communication. But they clearly took the time to look at people in the team, recognize where they are for the given skill, and use the appropriate means of communication, which is something I try very much now, sort of pay it forward to the teams I work on. I go into an organization, I take a pause. Oh, this person's probably an advanced beginner in Java. This person's probably a competent in architecture. And then I communicate appropriately at that level. Okay? Another key thing that Gary and Clayton taught me was habit, yeah. Like I mentioned before, they were nice to everyone because this is a great quote by Aristotle. It says, excellence is an art won by training and habituation. I'll skip that bit, but we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And I think that is a really key thing, yeah. I read a great book, actually, a while ago about saying there's no such thing as business ethics. You've only got ethics, yeah? If you say, oh, I'm ruthless at business, but I'm nice in my real life, that might not be true in reality. I think, that makes sense, yeah? And the same thing here is the guys just basically explained things to everyone at the right level. They took the time to be nice to everyone, and it became a habit. So therefore, even when they were under pressure, the deadlines were up there, they were still being nice, they were still explaining because it was habitual for them. It was like, changing gear for many of us who drive for a few years now. We don't even think about changing gear. And the same for those guys. They didn't even think about when they interacted with the team. It was habitual in terms of their being nice and explaining things. That's the first story.
I have a question about that story, actually. This is unrehearsed, so he wasn't expecting to be interviewed. So that was obviously a really good impact on your career, and they were great mentors for you. Did it make you a more productive team as well, the fact that they were taking the time to skill everyone up?
No doubt about it, because it was quite a ragtag group of people in some ways. It was like 3 interns, a couple of juniors, a couple of mid-level, only a couple of experts, actually. But it clearly did, as in the fact that they could communicate to everyone brought us all together. And we actually delivered, sadly, the software, ironically, government project, didn't make it into production. But as of all the departments we had, we developed our software the fastest in terms of, and the quality was really high. It was more of a political issue why it didn't make it into the actual into production or whatever. But yeah, definitely, Trish, definitely.
But the interesting thing, I think, about this is that in this particular case, we had 2 guys who are clearly experts, they've written books and they're well recognized in their field. And it's fantastic when people like that take the time to kind of spread their learning throughout the team. But you don't necessarily have to be an expert to add value to the team. I can't see which slide's coming next, so if I press advance, I'm not sure what's coming. Right. Actually, being a novice, being a beginner, being at that bottom end of the scale of the Dreyfus model can be extremely valuable in its own right. So we talk sometimes about the beginner's mind. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And I've definitely seen this in a number of different teams I've worked for. I worked at LMAX for a while, and there were 3 people there who had the title of junior developer. But that's not to say that they were insignificant or just peons to be coding away, doing what the experts told them. We did a lot of pair programming, and I learned probably more from some of those junior developers than I did from some of the mid-level or senior guys. Because what they did really, really well is they would question us in a way which kind of, it's not like a 2-year-old saying, why? It's okay, so you were sort of insinuating, why did you choose to do it that way? Why do you implement it like that? Or why are we picking this model over another model? Because these guys want to learn, but they don't have any of these rules to follow yet. They don't have any of these patterns. And when they ask you those questions, you do if your first instinct is to go, because we do, because I said so, because I'm the grown-up. But that's not the value there. The value actually for you as a more senior person is to listen to that and think, hang on a minute, why am I doing that? Why did I pick that pattern? Is there perhaps a better way? Especially when it comes to things like technology, which moves so quickly. I remember I was working for a team where I just chose vector as the collection because that's what we always used. And then, but Java had moved on and there was array list and a bunch of other stuff. So going back and questioning your assumptions and having a beginner or someone in the beginner's mind questioning those assumptions is really, really valuable. And I've found that working with some of these more junior developers, or certainly people who are going to open their minds to this kind of beginner's mindset, is really valuable if you've been doing something for a long time. You get in the rote and you keep doing things the same way. Sometimes you have to break those patterns. Or if you're going to continue doing them, have a think about why it is you're doing it that way. Russian roulette, what's the next slide? Yes, okay, perfect. So it's the same thing. So yeah, we're talking about these people. What I really wanted to talk about here is the rules section. So down at the bottom level, I was working with a guy in ThoughtWorks who was, again, one of these junior people. ThoughtWorks did this amazing thing where they kind of send all their newbies off to go and do a boot camp and then get indoctrinated in the ThoughtWorks way, which is not as scary as it sounds. It's quite good. So he's kind of fresh off this boot camp thing, and he's kind of he knows knows the ThoughtWorks way. He knows it inside out. And he's also extremely smart, very technical. But he's used to doing things this kind of step-by-step. These are the rules. This is how you do stuff. So he was sometimes a little bit inflexible in that side of things. So when I was trying to have a conversation with him, I didn't realize he was junior to begin with because he was so smart and he knew ThoughtWorks so well. He knew like loads more than I did. I was learning a lot off him to begin with. But it's only when I recognized that he was down sort of this end of the scale that I needed to talk to him in a slightly different way in terms of it's okay to bend the rules this way during these particular circumstances and help give him that leg up a little bit up that curve. Right, yes.
Me, thanks, Trish, yeah. So this story is a bit of an anti-meme of, share all the things. I'm sure many of us are familiar with that one. This is share none of the things. And this is a time when I worked... Be really careful not to mention certain names here. I'm going to protect the innocent and the guilty. But I worked in I was a contractor, and it was a very interesting environment. It was a very sort of political environment. It wasn't the government, I'll be clear to say that, but it was a lot of people sort of from political background. There was a lot of infighting, there was information hiding, the whole, knowledge is power type thing was going on, which made for a very strange team dynamic. And it was very hard to see that when I was in the team. I was there for 18 months. When I stepped out, I suddenly was like, wow, that was quite a poisonous environment, quite a poisonous team. And my little joke I'm going to share here is it was kind of like an episode of Game of Thrones every day. Yeah, obviously not quite as bad as Game of Thrones, but there was a lot of stuff. It was like working in the north, as my joke goes there. It was like every sort of few months, someone will get blamed for the failure of the project. This project was long-running, it wasn't delivering, and that's why we were brought in as contractors. But someone would get set up as the fall guy, or the fall person, I should say. They get blamed, after 3 months, 6 months, they'd move on, and someone else would come in, or the blame would shift to someone else in the team. And it was kind of horrible. I went in thinking, oh, yeah, this person's clearly not doing a very good job. And then that person left, another person stepped up, and, they got blamed for things. And I was thinking, wow, this person's not very good now as well. This is a bit weird. At the end of the 18 months, I moved on because I realized this was a continual pattern. And there was one person in particular, we'll call him Peter, to protect the guilty, that kind of used to set these people up. He was quite a toxic person to some degree, in that, like I say, he definitely thought knowledge is power. He never shared the vision. He also thought developers and architects on the team, he thought we weren't that good. We were slightly lazy. And if he shared the whole vision, we'd get distracted. We'd need to chat to other people across the teams. He used to get mad, for example, when we reached out to other teams in the organization because we didn't know what was going on. And I was like, that's what programming is. I've got a problem. I need to find out how the system's going to work together. But he was so controlling of the knowledge that he was kind of, I think he was worried as well if we had all the knowledge, we might not have a need for him, which was so not the case, because he had an amazing array of skills, but he was just so concerned about, hoarding the knowledge that eventually we might sort of branch out on our own, I guess. It made it quite interesting in terms of motivation as well. Now, there's a great book, Drive, Daniel Pink. It talks about how we as humans over the years have evolved, motivation. We started off like motivation 1.0, the book says. Survival. When we were back in this, thousands of years ago, running the plains, saber-toothed tigers, dinosaurs, whatever you want to believe, that kind of stuff, chasing us. Survival was key, yeah. Shelter, food, that kind of stuff was primary. We've moved on from that over the last 1,000 years, I'm pleased to say. Now it's motivation 2.0, the carrot and the stick. Yeah? And this person was very much a fan of the stick. If you'd done something wrong, he'd be going, oh, that's a bad job, single you out in a stand-up, that kind of thing, which made you feel rubbish for the rest of the day as well, yeah? The carrot is kind of, bonuses and money, and that works to some degree. And the book argues over the last few years, we've got tastier carrots and sharper sticks. We've got a little bit better, the whole bringing the agile in, the DevOps stuff, all that kind of thing. But really, we need to move to motivation 3.0. Is the premise of the book. And Motivation 3.0 is based on autonomy, purpose, and mastery. I'm sure a few of you have heard of this kind of thing before, but it makes a lot of sense. As a developer and an architect, I want to be autonomous. I want to be given a goal rather than do this, do that, do that. I want purpose. I want to contribute to my team. I want to contribute to the organization. I want to contribute to the world. I know I've mentioned it already, but it's kind of like what we're here for. Yeah, we're here to change the world. That's why you come to conferences, yeah? That's why you do software development. And mastery, I constantly want to get better. And as Tricia already mentioned, the industry changes so fast that mastery is a real challenge in our domain. New things coming out all the time, but that's kind of why I do it. I think Tricia and I have been chatting before, and we love to learn, love to master new things. But I want to make the point that as an individual, we need to move towards this. Wherever you are in the team, if you're an architect, architect, team lead, you've just started in a team. Think about this kind of stuff. People you're working with, the carrot and the stick will only get you so far. Read the book if you want to know a bit more about why that doesn't work. But think about this kind of thing. If you're a team lead, give broad goals, make people autonomous, give them purpose, allow them to master skills. Yeah, I think this is really key. And finally, I'm going to wrap up with Peter, I mentioned earlier. I've come in, as 15 years have passed now, whatever, I've come to realize that if Bob believes everyone has a problem, the problem is usually Bob. Yeah, and you get I picked Bob. It can be Jane. It can be any name, for example. But I often see this in organizations I go into now. I'm start chatting to people, and it's typically more of a senior person. They go, oh, don't trust Alice. She's not very good at architecture. Oh, Dave is not very good at Java, that kind of stuff. And then you go and chat to those people, and you realize they're pretty good. It may be the person who's doling out the bad advice is a bit worried, much like the Peter person I mentioned. So if you see this, if you are this person, no problem. Acknowledge it. Reach out to your team and ask for help, yeah? We all get into this sometimes just by nature of the system we're involved in or the team or whatever. But do be conscious as an individual and also the people around you, don't become the problem. Don't be that person, yeah?
Definitely see that more with knowledge silos because, if you know something and I know something, but we don't necessarily know the shared vision, then we're often fighting with each other without moving towards the same direction. And especially with the dev and the ops side, which is why DevOps is so important. Yeah. You end up going, well, ops don't move fast enough. Well, dev are always writing bugs. You have to work together to resolve those sorts of things and get this kind of shared understanding. Yes, I actually worked on a project which came in on time and under budget. Who else has done that? There's like 3 people. I'm sorry, what? What are these words? And this was really early on in my career as well. So again, a bit like your other story, this kind of spoiled me a little bit because I didn't realize I had worked on other stuff as an undergraduate. But this is my first graduate project. And I was working on a small team at Ford Motor Company. And so there I was a graduate. We had a team of maybe 3 developers, a contractor, me as a graduate, and undergraduate. And they're very good at Ford. They let you mentor and stuff. So they let me play being the team lead with this undergraduate. So I got this team of 2 people, which is fantastic because I'm like, yes, I'm team lead of these 2 people. But we had a very distinct goal that we needed to achieve. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Something I found fairly recently, which I thought was really, really interesting, is that if you measure project success rates by team size, it actually turns out that the smaller your team, the more likely you are to be successful. And this seems really counterintuitive because you think, well, surely you want to throw more bodies at the problem, right? Because none of us have read The Mythical Man Month. Yeah. Never heard that doesn't work at all. You find that with small teams, presumably because of the lack of communication overhead, because they can have this shared vision thing, they quite often are much more successful than large teams. Interestingly as well, if you spend a lot of money on a project, here's where the large percentages are a bad thing. There's a percentage failure rates. The more money you spend on a project, the more likely it is to fail. That's weird.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
So if you throw money, you throw bodies at the problem, you're more likely to fail. So I was working on this team, which was a very, very small team, very focused. We knew what we had to do. We had to solve a very specific problem to keep one of our major fleet customers. So this customer, they basically leased vehicles off us. They're a well-known British company that you will all have heard of. And we needed to make sure that we implemented this in a short time scale. I think it must have been weeks, maybe 6, 12 weeks, something like that. And we knew that if we didn't actually meet this goal of delivering this web project by this time, that Ford would actually see a massive decrease in revenue due to our failure. These 3 developers, 2 of whom, one was a borrowed contractor who wasn't supposed to be working on it, 2 of whom were like a graduate and an undergraduate. And it should have been terrifying, but it wasn't. It was very focusing. We knew what we were trying to achieve. We knew why we were doing it, and we could make much more sensible decisions based on those things. For example, at the time, Ford was very heavily using Microsoft technologies, and this is before .NET as well. But most of us had experience with Java. So A, use a technology which works best for the team, that the team understands. B, Java at the time had a lot more in terms of open source and free technologies and free libraries. So we could use free app servers and so forth, which we couldn't have used with Microsoft. And C, Ford had a lot of Sun Unix machines just kicking around, like doing nothing. So they could just kind of chuck Java programs on there pretty much for free. So this kind of contributed to our success rate. Knowing that we had no money, knowing that we had limited resources, we actually managed to make it work much better than if we'd had a big project with like 20, 30 people on it. On top of that, as well as having this shared vision, we also, because we were kind of small and trying to achieve something which was very challenging, we were really good at sharing knowledge and at mentoring. So I really wanted to mentor because I was like, I had 2 years experience or something, and this newbie intern type person, and I'd been an intern at Ford. So I could kind of help him get adjusted to being an intern at Ford. I could help him with kind of how it feels to actually do programming in the real world instead of at university. But this contractor was really good at helping both of us in terms of moving us further up the Dreyfus model in terms of, okay, well, vector is no longer a suitable choice, for example, and he would take the time out, even though the time limits were really, really hard, he took the time out to actually like whiteboard with us exactly what was going on, exactly why we needed to change the way we did stuff, instead of just kind of saying, do it that way because I said so. And this kind of mentoring model also helped us to accelerate our learning and achieve what we wanted to much, much faster. And yeah, so I remember as well, someone sat me down very, very nicely after I'd got out of university and said, you need to read this book. And I think what they were trying to say was, your Java's crap.
I had the same thing, Trish.
And, you know, I'd been doing Java in industry for a while as an undergraduate. But as a graduate, they're like, it's not good enough. Read this book, you know, it'll be good for you. And as I read it, I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, so you need to do this continuous learning. It's all well and good learning the syntax of a language or understanding kind of the nuts and bolts, but you need to continually grow. You need to continually learn, and you need to help your team do that as well. So these guys who sat me down and made me read this book, they did that in a very, very nice way. I didn't feel like they were saying, you're not very good at what you do. They were sort of saying, let me help you get better. Let me help you move up that curve.
Cool. So another story is, adopt a team. No, I'm sure many of you know I work with the Adopt OpenJDK and Adopt JSR projects. For those of you who don't actually know what they are, the OpenJDK is a reference implementation for Java since version 7. So the JDK that you download, be it Oracle, Azure, IBM, Red Hat, that kind of thing, is based off the reference implementation, the platform that implements the spec, which is the OpenJDK. JSRs are the process of how Java develops. So we have like a JSR for lambdas, a JSR for date time that went into JDK 8, that kind of thing. And these are developed now out in the open. There's nice websites you can go to see what the JSRs are. You can see, for example, what the JSR is for Jigsaw. There's a bit of a collection there. I know Mark's going to be talking about that in the session after this one, actually. Very, very interesting. But there's lots of collaboration needed, particularly, for example, in the Jigsaw project. It's fundamentally going to alter the way the Java platform was kind of put together, which might break tools and so forth. So you can't rely on just Oracle or just IBM or just Red Hat to test these things. We as a community have to get together and help out. Yeah. So I've been very fortunate. Actually, Martin, Ben, Marnie, Richard, they've all introduced me to this kind of thing over the last few years. And it's been fantastic working in a globally distributed team. A lot of development goes on, obviously, in North America and the UK, but loads over Europe, loads South America, loads Africa even. It's literally a completely distributed global team. And it's been an amazing opportunity. And Marnie and I actually have gone, Marnie Sakar, I'm not sure where he is at the moment, but he came up on stage earlier on, was carrying the laptop. And we've sort of toured the world a little bit, or mainly Europe, going and trying to sort of develop other leaders. So we go in, like we sort of know a bit about OpenJDK, a bit about JSR, and we train other people to train other people. Yeah, that's the kind of thing we do. And it's been a fantastic opportunity as an individual, learning sort of this global team, learning the impact I can have, and Marnie can have, and Richard can have, and everyone from the LJC, or the London Java community, can have. It's taught me a few interesting things, yeah, and I've seen this in my career as well, as I've sort of branched out across working globally. But you've got to be respectful when you're communicating cross-culture. Now, Trish and I talked about this. There's lots of different things around. Communication is a whole big topic, Trish, and we sort of bounced around. But cross-culture, there's the simple things like language as an individual. I might have to speak a little bit slower. I get a bit bouncy sometimes, particularly when I'm presenting and stuff. I speak very fast naturally, so I have to slow down, choose my words carefully. And that's not being rude. That's not dumbing things down. That's being respectful of the other person. Like, I speak a little bit of German, for example, but if people start using fancy words, I'm lost.
It's things like idioms as well, isn't it?
So idioms are a classic, Trish, aren't they?
Idioms, you're using individual words that you understand, but you're putting them together and you're like, I don't know what that means.
Totally.
Let's not put the cart before the horse. What?
Yeah, thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
And then my Brazilian friend was like, box? Where's the box?
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, that's totally my bad. Yes, and not their fault. It's totally my bad. So you'll be respectful of culture. And even things like, even in like presentations we do, it's very tempting to reference pop culture. But that works in North America, say, and some of Europe, and definitely the UK. Doesn't necessarily translate. So I have to kind of, I speak to my friends in the team and say, I want to make this point. Can you recommend some kind of material to help me make that point? Same definitely with idioms, with just generally the way you're trying to communicate, when you're trying to convey information as an individual to your team, you've really got to think. And it's been a fantastic opportunity to learn so much about myself and the diversity out there in terms of culture, race, gender, the whole thing. The more diverse a team is, perhaps the more challenging it is to work with initially, but definitely the better results you can get. Yeah, I've learned that over my career for sure.
I love working in London, actually, because in London I found the greatest diversity anywhere.
Amazing, isn't it?
I travel a lot and I see a lot of individual cultures when I go out and see there. But when you're in London, you're often working in a team where you're working with Europeans and Americans and Southern Hemisphere people and Africans. And I think that's fantastic. I think you learn a lot about yourself, like you say, as much as anything else.
To your point, actually, exactly that. I was in a meeting, actually. I work for Not on the High Street at the moment with one of my clients. And I was in a meeting, we're doing a DevOps kind of meeting, we're talking. And I think it was about 10 of us in the room. And I looked around the room, and there was myself and Will, 2 English people, and the rest were international. And we were all speaking English, but it was a fantastic thing. And there was some sort of confusion, and we were trying to clarify what was going on. The whole DevOps thing was working really well. But it was really it was one of those moments where I stood back and thought, this is an amazing team. There's 2 English people working in London, and 8, 10 other people that are international. It's just fantastic. And also, I've learned a great paper here, the servant leader, the notion of being a leader who sets a shared vision, make sure, as an individual, they're responsible for the team, but they make sure the vision is shared, they make sure everyone understands, can contribute in a certain way, and then they kind of get out the way. Yeah? They're not leading with a carrot and stick, that kind of thing. They're saying, how can I help you? What's blocking you? And I definitely see this in companies I work where the management and leaders are really effective. They act as servant leaders. They serve their team. Yeah, they identify roadblocks, be it bureaucracy, money, skills, that kind of thing, and they just help their team get better and better. So this is a great little read if you're wanting to develop your kind of leadership skill. And if you want to come and chat to me afterwards, I can recommend stacks of other leadership books. I'm quite a book junkie, a massive commute, so I read loads. But this is really quite interesting. I learned from working with the Adopt projects.
So something I read, I used to do a lot of reviewing people's CVs and resumes, is everyone says I have good communication skills. I would like to dispute that. Everyone has communication skills, definitely, otherwise you wouldn't be able to speak to the person next to you. But I don't think that we, particularly in technology, I don't think that we value communication with other humans enough. I think that we think our job is to commune with the computer, tell it what to do, which it never does, and other humans will tell us stuff and we'll input into the computer. When in actual fact, that's really not what happens, especially in a team environment. You have to be able to communicate between those different individuals in the team. I was working for a team where we did code reviews as our way of approving the code. So I've done things like pair programming in the past. I've done, let's call it ad hoc development, where they just say, here's a task, do it, check it in, you'll be fine. As long as the tests pass. Oh, what tests? That wasn't like this environment. This is an environment where we have tests, we have static analysis to make sure that your code conforms to particular formats, and the easily automatable stuff. But there's a final code review where we're going to make sure that the code makes sense, that the design makes sense, and then after that, hopefully you get the little tick and everything goes through fine. The thing about code reviews, especially if you're not doing it as a pair sort of sat down at the computer, or if you're not doing it through like a shared screen, if you're doing it through a code review tool where you have to type stuff down. By the way, JetBrains, who I work for, do a very good code review tool. Just saying. If you're using a code review tool, you have to write stuff down, and it's in like little comments in line with the code or overall at the end of it. And you have to be very careful with the written word. This kind of comes back a little bit to the cultural thing, but in our particular case, we're talking about native English speakers, granted from different sides of the Atlantic. But when you see something written down, there are different ways of interpreting it. Let's have a look at this. Why did you do it that way? Or maybe you might read it as, why did you do it that way? Or you might read it as, why did you do it that way? And I'm going to read that according to pretty much the mood that I'm in and my knowledge of the person who wrote it. Okay, so if perhaps I'm not getting on amazingly well with the person who wrote that comment, or if I don't understand them properly yet, I'm going to take that, I'm going to be a bit defensive about that. I'm going to think, well, I thought it was the best thing to do, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have done it that way. But, you read this sort of, toneless text, and you add your own tone, you add your own interpretation of it. And so written communication is so very difficult, particularly through things like code reviews. So when I was going through this code review process, I often felt like, and the person who was doing most of my code reviews or reviewing most of my code, he did say up front, I'm quite dry in the way that I write stuff, so please feedback if perhaps you think I'm being a bit harsh, or please don't read it that way. But after a few months of this, you do get, oh God, again? Because everything felt like a tiny criticism. Everything felt like, you haven't done that right, you haven't considered this, you didn't do that, what about that? And you're just thinking, it's just like relentless.
Death by paper cut, Trish, yeah?
Right, exactly. And this, the particular person who's reviewing my code, he also was making comments on the design. And I feel like for a start, let's just start and say, code review is not the time to critique the design at the end of the process, right? Whether you spent half a day on it, a day, a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, telling people at the end their design is wrong is not the right time to do that. And so if someone has done a piece of code which passes all the tests, passes the static analysis, is understandable, if it doesn't quite have the design that you would have done it in, you probably need to let go. Now, people who have control issues, or very strong, experienced people with very strong opinions, let's say, often feel like letting go is going to be letting the other person fail, is kind of letting them tumble to their death, if you like. But of course, there's another way of seeing this. You should be letting people free. You should trust them. If they go in a slightly different direction, but it still passes, if it still meets the criteria, then what's to say that that's the wrong way to do stuff? So you wouldn't have done it that way. But there's nothing solidly wrong with it. So unless there is something solidly wrong with it, then just let it go free. And this is something that perhaps I could have done better to communicate to these people and say, look, leave me alone. or the alternative is, if you know that there are going to be problems with this design down the road, if you had a very clear direction that you wanted me to take before I started writing the code, you should have told me that beforehand, if you do have a very clear direction. We did used to have a lot of conversations about design, about direction, about the way we would do stuff. But what I've realized in retrospect, again, like some of your stories, you step back after the fact, like way after the fact, you're like, oh yeah, I've realized something.
So much easier, isn't it? Like,
yeah, what I realized in retrospect is that there are, of course, different communication styles, and we all know this. I prefer to communicate sort of visually, preferably via a whiteboard with you scribbling it right in front of me, but you can make it work remotely as well. You can hand draw some diagrams on a piece of paper, take a photo and email that. Or you can, screen sharing is easy these days, so you can draw some boxes and lines on a screen. It would have really helped me get my head in the right place design-wise if we could have had some of these whiteboarding type sessions before I wrote the code. The flip side is that other people are very good in terms of thinking of code. Now, obviously I can read and write code, that's what I do, but I don't see the design in the code. I can kind of see this much code maximum, and I'm not going to see the bigger picture from this. But some people do. Some people can use this and they can read the code and they can feel the design. And I tried to move closer to the person who's code reviewing me. I tried to move closer to his way of seeing things, which in this particular case was Cody. But I didn't really. I should have made more effort to force him to move closer to my way of doing stuff. Yeah. You have to mix up communication styles if you're working in a team, particularly if your team is. We were a small team. We were like 2 or 3 people rotating in and out of the team. But if you're a team of like 6 people, or even if you're a team of like 4 people, you're going to need to mix up the communication styles within that team. Because people are going to think in different ways. And it also depends on the day, right? Sometimes you're thinking visually, and sometimes you're just thinking, just give me the code, I'll get on with it. So you need to mix up communication styles when you're working in a team.
Cool. So my next story, is the LJC tipping point. For those of you who don't know what the LJC is, it's the London Java community. Quick show of hands, who is a member of the London Java community, actually? oh, what? Okay, so that's about 30%, I guess, for the camera there. But
why aren't the rest of you?
Yeah, I'd tell you like more. So I'm going to have to like little mini pitch here. But it's a Java user group, but it's not just about Java. It's I think about 4,000 members strong now on meetup.com. And we meet regularly, once every week, every 2 weeks. Share ideas. There's a mailing list as well. So even people not based in London, like you're still quite active, Trish, aren't you, even though being based in Seville at the moment. Share ideas on the mailing list, get together. We run like an unconference once a year. It's just a fantastic team, basically. And I use the word team loosely because it's like 4,000 people, but it's a fantastic team of people that just share ideas, drive knowledge forward, and just are a lot of fun to be around, to be honest. One of the things I actually joined the LJC when I was doing a lot of remote working from home. I was kind of, I've got my social circle, that kind of thing, but I was missing the tech talk. So I came up to London in the evenings, and I'd do my normal thing, coding in the day, come up to London in the evening, meet up with people, and it was just a fantastic experience. I felt part of the team very soon, and definitely looking back, it's very much an inflection point in my career. I was doing all right, and I was enjoying myself at that point. But when I joined the LJC, really got involved with it, it's kind of that point where suddenly loads of opportunities opened up, and it was just a lot more fun as well. I realized there was loads of people that thought the same way as I did, and like wanted to kind of challenge me and that kind of stuff. So as an individual, they were sort of impacting me, and there were other people on the team. But then I kind of pay it forward now that I've been with the LJC for like 3 or so years now. So for me, it comes back that the tipping point is a great book, Malcolm Gladwell, and it says the little things can make a big difference. Yeah, and what that means is it talks sort of in terms of like how viruses spread. Obviously, bear with me, this analogy is not great for a second. But in terms of some viruses turn into pandemics, epidemics, there's a tipping point. Some viruses don't. Yeah, you look at the plague, that kind of thing, that was horrible. But but other sort of viruses come and go. And it's the same thing with fashion. Some things tip, some things don't. Same with technology. Docker, totally past the tipping point. Yeah, but you think of like EJB or something like that, not so much past the tipping point now. But it's very interesting in terms of how these things do tip. Why is the LJC so successful? I go to conferences quite a bit, and I chat about the LJC, and people, as soon as they know I'm from the LJC, they're like, the London Java community, bunch of unicorns. You guys, you're so like unique in that you constantly bringing new people on the team, you're constantly growing, people are stepping up to speak, stepping up to write books, and they find in their user group, sometimes they struggle doing these kind of things. And there's a few really good user groups, so not just the LJC, but we've definitely tipped. Something happened a few years ago where the LJC sort of reached a critical mass, and now it's very much self-fulfilling. Barry started it here a few years back with Martin. Ben's been really influential from my career as well in terms of the LJC. And for some reason, at some point, it tipped kind of now. The guys are still really involved, but it continues on sort of, regardless as well, as in that it's got a momentum of its own. It's a fantastic team, and the individuals make a big point. And I want to point out in the book, there's mavens, connectors, and salespeople. That's what contributes to a tipping point. So mavens are kind of the people that are on the leading edge. They're trying new things. They're creating the grand vision of things. They're the kind of people that are always doing the new stuff, yeah. Connectors are the people that have, lots of different feet in different camps. So they might be a developer, they might be a business person, they might be an architect, they might write, they might present, they connect lots of social groups together. And the salespeople are the people that once an idea has been fully formed and a vision has been achieved, they sell it into a team, sell it into an organization. Now, I think like Martin Verbeek here, I don't know if Martin's around actually, but Martin's very much a maven. He's constantly challenging the status quo. He's coming up with new stuff. He's setting the big vision, yeah? Ben is very much a connector. Ben introduced me to InfoQ, to people at O'Reilly, all these other people. Ben is kind of one of those people who's super clever technically, but really good socially in that he joins a lot of organizations, a lot of teams together. And Barry, I'm sure he won't like me saying this, but Barry's a good salesman. Yeah,
that's a bad word when it comes to developers.
Barry works at set up RepWorks, I say, a great ethical recruitment company, which are fantastic. If you're looking for a job, check out RepWorks. They're amazing.
We don't get paid by them, by the way.
No kickbacks. Barry's just a cool guy. He's helped me so much. But he's very much a salesperson, like in a good way. Yeah, Barry knows. Like he sort of asks questions. Well, what do you need? And then he goes, I know someone that can help you. Like that's a bit of connection there. But Barry is really good at kind of selling in ideas and driving change, that kind of thing. And I think these three key things in the book are, individuals in the LJC. We've got other people doing the same kind of roles as well. Is really influential in why the LJC has kind of tipped, why it's been successful. I also got another shout out to Barry here, and Tricia mentioned it already actually, but communication is key. And I'm quite a visual person, particularly when I'm talking about architecture and stuff. I love drawing on stuff on the whiteboard and like, working with my team, kind of coming together. And Barry actually tipped me off to this book, fantastic book. It is for visual thinkers. So like Trisha's already alluded to, not every time is the right time to go with, visual thinking. Some of us think more in terms of auditory, or some of us like to explore things. And, there's totally a time and a place. And as an individual on your team, you've got to recognize what certain people will like lean towards, and you also got to recognize the situation, what the situation dictates as well. But if you are looking to learn how to draw and explain interesting challenges within your team, this book is an awesome book. And we're actually, like, Barry's got some great presentations he does in the LJC now, where he's using the techniques, and you can see people in the audience clicking, and they want to join the LJC. They want to become part of that team because they understand the shared vision. And this is a really good book for that kind of thing. That's yours, isn't it?
So the last story I want to tell really is around the people in the team are human. That might sound obvious, but really we tend not to think of teams that way. If we go back to the first picture in our team presentation where we had our little Lego clones, you tend to think of humans, the people in your team, as being, sure, they're humans, but they're like other people, so I don't need to worry about them too much. We have to think about the fact that humans have particular needs. They're very simple needs, but humans have needs and they have emotions, and they're going to bring this stuff into work as well, whether they want to or not. So I'm sure everyone's been to work when they've had a bad day. There are some places you work where that happens more often than not. But you tend to think of yourself as being like, oh, I'm in my own little misery. I'm going to try and keep myself away from everyone else, because like I'll just keep my misery to myself, and no one will notice. I'll just get on and do my code in an Eeyore kind of way. But in actual fact, what you find is that whether you want to or not, your own little misery impacts everyone, whether they realize it or not, whether it's just something that you said at stand up, or whether it's just the fact that you don't join people at lunch, or something simple like that. Your negative mood, your negativity is going to impact the people around you. And this is something I learned, well, I wouldn't say the hard way. I had a fantastic boss, and he actually pulled me aside into the boardroom one day, and he said, "Trisha," and I'm like, "Oh God, please don't fire me. I love this job." He's like, "You're not very happy," and I'm like, "I'm not?" He said, normally you're like cheerful and bouncy and you bring the energy into the team. But for quite a while now, I don't know whether it was days or weeks or years, he's like, for a while now, you've not been your normal cheerful self. I want to know what I can do to help you. And I was taken aback by this. This has never happened to me in the past. And I've definitely been to work miserable before, don't get me wrong. And he wanted to know if there was something that he could do to make me feel better. He wanted to know if there was something wrong with the team environment which was impacting me, or if they often used to use me as a barometer for the team. So if I'm miserable, is there something wrong? And then I was like, well, no, actually, it's not work. It's some personal stuff. I had some illness in my family, and I was having some trouble with my boyfriend at the time. And so he's like, you don't have to tell me any of this stuff if you don't want to, because it's personal, and I'm not prying, and it's really nothing to do with me. But if you want to, you can. So I cried all over him like a big fat girl, and he was like, oh, there. But it was very, very helpful for me because, A, I didn't realize that other people had picked up on this. I thought I was keeping it to myself, which clearly I was doing a terrible job of. But B, the fact that he sort of said, is there something I can do to help you in the team? Is there something wrong with the team? Is there some way I can help? And I expected him to say, cheer the hell up, get over it, get on with your work. And that's not what he was saying. He's like, let me help you. And it turned out to be very valuable too, because a few weeks later, the illness in my family got quite a lot worse, and I needed to take time off on a regular basis. And it was nice that he'd pulled me aside first, because if I kind of sprung that on him later on and said, I need to take every other Monday afternoon off for infinity, he would have been like, where did this come from? So this kind of informal chat was really, really helpful to me, and also made me feel much, much more cheerful and much more relaxed. So I actually cheered up a lot more. Russian roulette with the slides. Okay, cool.
Awesome.
So there's this awesome book by Kathy Sierra, who's kind of responsible for the Head First books. It's called Making Users Awesome, but it's not, and which we all should read anyway. As developers, if we're developers, architects, marketing people, user experience people, we should definitely read this. But what this book is basically about is that your users, or the humans around you, are humans who have human needs, and what they want to do is they want to feel awesome. They want to feel great. And your product can make them feel great, but not by you telling them how amazing your product is, but by you helping that person become awesome or feel awesome or be awesome. And that's kind of how we should be thinking about our teams as well. Definitely read this book. It's very quick to read, but it'll change your life.
It's a great recommendation, Trisha. You recommended it to me, and I was like, this is awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah, brilliant.
It just changes the way you think about stuff. And so we can approach our teams in the same way. How can I make you awesome? How can I make my team leader awesome? How can I make the juniors awesome? I need to come into the team thinking, if I make everyone else awesome, like my boss pulling me aside and trying to make me better, how that should impact the whole team so that we all become much more awesome. We have 1 minute left to do the summary, and I thought the summary was going to take about 10 minutes. So we're either going to have to speak quickly or you're going to be late for coffee. The summary of this whole talk is that we as individuals can make our team awesome. It's not down to the team leaders necessarily to set the culture or to tell people how to be more productive. Every individual, whether they're junior or senior or somewhere in the middle, can have an impact on the team, hopefully a positive impact on the team.
Yeah, totally.
So firstly, building a shared vision. And this is from Guardians of the Galaxy, by the way, which you still haven't seen, right?
I know.
So you have no idea what this picture means. But with a shared vision, with a shared goal, a team can be much more productive. So, for example, in my case, when we delivered that project on time and under budget, that's because we knew where we were going. We had this vision, so we knew how to make decisions. We could weigh up the pros and cons when we knew where the end state was. But your story...
Exactly the same, yeah, it's just like in terms of the contractors I worked with in my first story, the LJC, there's a clear shared vision. And the individuals in the team are constantly checking whether other people on the team understand that. So as an individual, you're going, does my team understand the goals? That kind of thing. Taking the pulse, is really important to making sure. Because it's kind of like classic, like from Alice in Wonderland, where she reaches a fork in the road and she's like, should I go left or right? And the hare's like, well, where do you want to go? And she responds, I don't know. Well, it doesn't matter which road you take then, basically. You need that shared vision to know which path in the road you're going to walk.
Right. And it's not necessarily down to just the leader to build the shared team vision, because the shared team vision might be we are a team that learns, or we're a team that's nice, like your contractors. Yeah. So you can help contribute to the shared team vision. Mentor and be mentored. So obviously, we've talked a lot about mentors who've impacted us, and maybe where we've tried to mentor people as well. What's very, probably a bit more difficult, especially if you've been in the industry for probably longer than about a year, is accepting the mentoring too. Like listening to what other people will say, allowing yourself to be mentored by junior people, and allowing yourself to get better through listening to other people and accepting mentoring.
It's quite common in our industry, and it's like 1 year junior, 2 year senior.
Right.
That's it. And the problem is, like, when you're a senior, and I definitely had this now, is there are so many people, there's like literally 800 people here I can learn from, yeah, definitely. I have to tell myself mentally, like, this is an opportunity for learning, and I'll literally say that in my mind sometimes. Sometimes I'll get, like, as a consultant, you go in, you fix problems, but there's still opportunities to learn. You just don't tell the clients, obviously, but you roll in, and I have to tell myself now, because like Trish said, you get into the expert mode. I know best, I'm here as a consultant, but there's opportunities for learning all around you. There'll be stacks, so the next 2 days, there will be like 1,000 and more opportunities for everyone here to learn stuff. But you have to tell yourself, this is an opportunity to be mentored. This is an opportunity to learn, not just from the presenters, but from everyone around you.
Absolutely. So in a related note, be open. Be open to new ideas, be open to other ways of communicating, be open to learning, be open to other cultures and diversity. I get a little bit worried when I hear about poor cultural fit, because I feel a little bit like we ought to be much more open and inclusive of different people's approaches to things. And often someone's completely different approach to a problem might be exactly what you wanted. So we should be much more open to new things.
I've definitely learned, without banging the diversity drum too much, but I've definitely learned as teams become more diverse that I've worked in, we get more done and we have more fun because there's so many different ideas coming into that melting pot. And you just have to be open. I've seen developers, like when I joined one company, developers have been there for 40 years or whatever, and they only did Perl, they only did one thing a certain way, and it was really hard to, they had amazing talents, but they wouldn't contribute to the team because they weren't open. And I'd hate to be that kind of person.
Small things have a big impact. I don't know if anyone's seen the trailer for Ant-Man yet. So in case you don't know who Ant-Man is, this is Ant-Man. He's very small.
I didn't know who Ant-Man is either, apparently.
It's coming out this summer, so after this summer, you'll all know who Ant-Man is. But the tiniest things can make a big impact on the team, positive and negative. So my negative mood coming into the team every day, or miserable, had, I assume, I couldn't see it from inside my own misery, a bigger impact on the team. Similarly, small things like being nice to people, like just sharing the little thing you learned yesterday. These tiny things have a big impact on the team. Things like when I first joined LMAX, I suggested in the first week we should have brown bags to share knowledge, because I knew nothing about what LMAX did or what the domain was, or I was trying to learn a lot more about Agile, and they were very agile. And what I wanted was people to tell me stuff. So we started Monday lunchtime brown bags, and it's like half an hour. And that had a big impact on the whole team. So these small things can have a big impact.
For me, it's like the tipping point I mentioned. The sort of the subtitle of the book is Small Things Have a Big Impact. And these small contributions by individuals, and I picked on 3 there, but there's plenty of amazing people in the LJC, and small things tip to a bigger impact. I think that's really key. Do not underestimate the small things, the moods, the learning, just your input to a team really makes a difference.
It's the butterfly effect, isn't it?
I love it. Yeah, totally. Chaos kind of thing, isn't
chaos,
it?
Exactly. Be nice. So with great power comes great responsibility, and that's why Spider-Man's on the screen. Well, I'm really stretching the superhero analogy. I know. I'm sorry. I don't mean be nice in a kind of fluffy, wet, wimpy, or be nice to each other. I mean it in a very positive way, the way your mum said, be nice, play nicely. And I think this is something that as an industry we have not been very good at lately. We are not necessarily supportive in our criticism. We're often trying to tear other people down to make ourselves look great. And if you're truly great, you don't need to pull people down.
Yep.
You can be nice. You can share your knowledge as a very positive thing, and that makes you look better than trying to tear people down. Yep. So if you're giving feedback, if you're trying to mentor, if you're trying to get someone to change the way they do stuff, you're going to be much more effective if you're nice about it than if you're negative about it.
Yeah, I think as a group of people, developers, architects, we can be ego-driven, can't we, at times? But the most fun people I work with, people that have had a massive impact on me and my teams, are not. They're actually the most clever people, but they've got, they've controlled their ego. They're very, they've made being nice a habit. I mentioned about Clayton and Gary, and they just, when it becomes a habit, like it's instinctive to you. Even when you're doubling down, the pressure's on, you still behave nice because that's what you do. That's who you are. I think it's a really key point.
And finally. Don't be an arse, okay? It's not just like be nice to people. It's like also try and curb your, like I was sort of saying, try and curb your instinct to tear people down, to make that snide comment. And I'm terrible at this because I do like my sarcastic comments because they're terribly funny.
Be funny, can't they? Yeah.
But you have to be aware that other people might not hear it the right way. They might be having a bad day. So don't be an arse, because no one wants to work with you if you're that person. Yeah,
and I've actually experienced at least one team where I've worked on that, and it's toxic to the team. Like ultimately, people want to leave. It's no fun. You don't learn. So yeah, having seen it, please don't learn from my mistakes, kind of thing. Regularly retrospect. Am I in a poisonous situation? Because it's like we just said. Like it's so hard sometimes when you're up close to something to know what's going on. But step back if occasionally, and if you're that person, ask for help. Yeah, because it's very easy sometimes when the pressure's on to kind of just start doubling down and like cracking the whip. But check yourself, because it's you'll kind of have a negative impact on the team.
That is all. Thank you very much.